Monique Davis, a powerhouse in the corporate world, the visionary CEO of a thriving tech company and the majority shareholder in one of the nation's most respected banks, had faced many battles on her way to the top, but nothing quite like what awaited her on this seemingly ordinary afternoon as she stepped into her local branch for a scheduled routine meeting, a meeting that should have been a formality, a simple transaction handled with the professionalism befitting a woman of her stature. Yet as she approached the polished mahogany counter, her confident stride faltered for a fraction of a second when the bank manager, a man whose tone dripped with barely concealed disdain, looked her up and down with skepticism before coldly informing her that he couldn't assist her without proper verification, his unspoken doubt hanging heavy in the air. A silent accusation that she didn't belong in this space, that her wealth and influence were mere illusions, that she was an intruder in a world that was not meant for someone who looked like her. And Monique felt the sting of that denial more sharply than any previous challenge, because this was not just business, it was a personal affront, a stark reminder of the systemic barriers she had spent her entire career dismantling, the invisible walls built by prejudice and assumptions. And as the minutes ticked by with no apology, no recognition of her identity or accomplishments, only the cold, dismissive gaze of the manager, Monique's resolve hardened, the fire that had fueled her ascent now burning hotter than ever. And with quiet dignity, she collected herself, refusing to be reduced to a shadow of doubt cast by someone else's ignorance. And as she turned to leave the bank, a plan began to crystallize in her mind, not just to reclaim her rightful place in that branch, but to hold the entire institution accountable for its failures, to send a message that discrimination, no matter how subtle or institutionalized, would be met with unyielding strength and justice. Because Monique Davis was not merely a CEO or a shareholder, she was a symbol of resilience, a force to be reckoned with, and this moment, painful as it was, would become the catalyst for a reckoning that would change everything. Monique Davis, undeterred by the blatant disrespect she had faced at the hands of the bank manager, immediately mobilized her inner circle, calling upon her most trusted legal advisors, sharp PR strategists, and loyal board members, convening a confidential war room to craft a plan not only to address the personal affront but to dismantle the deeper systemic rot that had allowed such discrimination to fester within the very institution she had helped build. As word of the incident leaked quietly through the bank's corridors, whispers and rumors swirling in hushed tones among employees and executives alike, the atmosphere inside the bank became thick with tension and uncertainty, with some scrambling to contain damage and others rooting for change, while Monique's allies, aware of the symbolic and practical power her position afforded her, urged swift and decisive action, reminding her that this moment was about more than retribution, was about setting a precedent, reshaping culture, and holding leadership accountable. And so, with a steely determination, Monique scheduled an emergency board meeting, preparing to confront the executives face to face, armed with undeniable evidence of the discrimination she had endured, including eyewitness testimonies, surveillance footage, and documented encounters, ready to expose the hypocrisy hidden beneath polished annual reports and glossy corporate images. When the day arrived, Monique entered the room not as a victim, but as an indomitable force, her presence commanding the attention and respect of the board members, who could no longer dismiss the issue as a minor oversight or isolated incident. And as she laid out her case with meticulous detail and unwavering resolve, she forced the leadership to confront the uncomfortable truths about the culture they had allowed to thrive, a culture that marginalized, belittled, and dismissed those who did not fit a narrow mold of power and privilege. And in that charged atmosphere, Monique's voice became a clarion call for change, demanding immediate action, transparency, and accountability, while making it unmistakably clear that her authority as both a shareholder and CEO was not merely symbolic but backed by unrelenting conviction, shifting the power dynamics in the room and signaling the beginning of a new chapter for the bank, defined by justice, equity, and respect for all who walked through its doors. Monique Davis entered the emergency board meeting room with an unshakable presence, every step measured and purposeful, as she prepared to deliver not just a complaint but a transformative demand for justice that would reverberate far beyond the polished mahogany table surrounded by bank executives who had until now turned a blind eye to the insidious discrimination festering within their ranks. Armed with meticulously compiled evidence including video footage capturing the bank manager's dismissive and condescending behavior toward her, sworn statements from witnesses who had observed the incident, and documented accounts of similar discriminatory encounters reported by other clients and employees, Monique laid bare the stark reality of a toxic culture that had allowed such blatant disrespect to persist unchecked, making it clear that this was not an isolated incident but a symptom of systemic bias that undermined the integrity and values the bank purported to uphold. And with unwavering conviction, she demanded immediate suspension of the offending manager, pending a full and transparent investigation, insisting that accountability was non-negotiable and that the bank must publicly acknowledge the wrongdoing to begin healing the wounds inflicted on her and countless others. Her voice, calm but fierce, echoed throughout the room as she further called for mandatory diversity and sensitivity training for all staff, emphasizing that change could not be superficial or performative but required deep, structural reform to dismantle prejudice and foster a genuinely inclusive environment. And as the weight of her words settled, murmurs of support began to ripple through the gathering, signaling a shift in the corporate culture from complacency to accountability. While outside the walls of the boardroom, the story quickly captured public attention, the media amplifying Monique's message and painting her not only as a victim, but as a fearless leader challenging entrenched inequities, galvanizing a wave of support that pressured the bank to move decisively. And as the investigation unfolded and the manager's suspension was confirmed, it became clear that Monique's unyielding stance was setting a powerful precedent, signaling to employees and customers alike that discrimination would no longer be tolerated, transforming the narrative from one of exclusion to one of empowerment, and solidifying Monique's role not just as a CEO defending her own dignity, but as a pioneering force for justice and equality in corporate America. Monique Davis stood at the forefront of a new era as the dust settled from the whirlwind that had shaken the very foundations of the bank she helped build, knowing that the moment was not just about correcting one grave injustice but about spearheading a deep and lasting cultural transformation that would ripple far beyond the marble halls of the institution. With the bank's public commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion now official and boldly declared in a widely broadcasted press conference where Monique herself spoke with passion and clarity, she outlined sweeping reforms designed to empower marginalized voices both within the company and throughout the broader community. Initiatives that included robust mentorship programs for underrepresented employees, transparent hiring practices aimed at eliminating bias, comprehensive sensitivity and anti-racism training mandated at every level of the organization, and the establishment of an independent oversight committee to monitor progress and hold leadership accountable. The manager responsible for the disgraceful incident was formally terminated, his departure a clear signal that zero tolerance for discrimination was no longer a mere slogan but an uncompromising policy enforced without exception. And fresh leadership was ushered in with explicit directives to prioritize equity and to rebuild trust with the bank's diverse clientele. Monique's courageous stand ignited a powerful conversation about systemic racial bias not only inside corporate America but across the nation, inspiring CEOs, board members, and policymakers to reevaluate their own institutions and commit to meaningful change, while countless employees, customers, and communities found renewed hope and validation in her example, her role evolving far beyond that of a CEO to become a beacon of justice and empowerment, a living testament to the impact one resolute woman can have when she refuses to accept inequality and fights tirelessly to transform pain into progress, proving that true leadership is measured not just by profits but by the courage to confront uncomfortable truths and the strength to forge a more inclusive future for all.